In the vast panorama of American history, one figure rises from humble beginnings to shape the destiny of a nation. Ulysses S. Grant, born in 1822, was not a man of flamboyance or loud ambition. Instead, he carried a quiet resolve, a strength forged in stillness, sharpened by hardship, and destined to alter the course of the United States. His story begins in rural Ohio, where open fields and gentle hills formed the silent backdrop of his childhood. Grant was not viewed as a future hero, he was simply a calm, observant young boy, more comfortable with horses than with people. Yet within him lived an untapped determination. As the decades unfolded, that quiet boy would become the commander who preserved the Union, the leader who sought peace, and the symbol of steady courage in a divided era. This is the beginning of a journey that transformed an ordinary life into an extraordinary legacy. In the early 1830s, young Ulysses S. Grant, about 9 years old, lived in the quiet village of Georgetown, Ohio. The countryside was peaceful, rolling green fields, wooden fences, and simple cabins. Unlike other boys, Ulysses was quiet and thoughtful, often walking alone, observing the world with care. He noticed the movements of animals, the shifts in weather, and the rhythm of rural life. His father, Jesse Grant, expected discipline, and young Ulysses performed chores calmly, whether tending animals, hauling wood, or helping on the family land. Yet it was his connection with horses that set him apart. Even at 10, he could calm a stubborn colt with patience and gentle hands. These years of quiet observation and steady work were shaping his character, planting the seeds of resilience, focus, and determination that would one day define him as a leader. In a world that saw only a reserved boy, the future general and president was quietly emerging. By the early 1830s, Ulysses S. Grant, now around 10 years old, began experiencing the quiet lessons of discipline and responsibility. Life in Georgetown, Ohio, was simple, yet demanding. Each day brought chores, tending animals, and helping his father, Jesse Grant, with the family farm. Young Ulysses approached every task with a calm determination uncommon for his age. It was during these years that his connection with horses deepened. He could read their movements, predict their reactions, and guide even the most stubborn animals with patience and care. The village neighbors noticed his composure, his steady hands, and his quiet confidence. At school, he was not the fastest learner, but he absorbed lessons carefully, showing remarkable attention to detail. Observation and calm reflection became his tools. In these unremarkable yet formative years, Ulysses S. Grant quietly built the foundations of resilience, focus, and steadfastness, traits that would one day guide armies. By the early 1830s, Ulysses S. Grant, now around 12 years old, began exploring the surrounding Ohio countryside with quiet curiosity. He wandered along streams, studied the shapes of hills, and observed the behaviors of animals with patience uncommon for his age. Life was simple, yet every moment taught him lessons in observation, responsibility, and calm judgment. His connection with horses deepened further, and he learned to anticipate their movements with subtle gestures. Even chores became opportunities to practice focus and diligence. At school, he remained quiet, absorbing knowledge carefully, and excelling not through speed, but by steady attention. These formative years, spent in the rhythm of nature and routine, shaped the reflective, patient, and resilient qualities that would later define Ulysses S. Grant as a leader of men and a general capable of guiding a nation through its most challenging trials. The quiet boy's mind, always observing, was already learning lessons. As Ulysses S. Grant entered his early teens, around 13 years old, he began to show the first signs of quiet leadership. The fields and forests of Georgetown, Ohio became his classroom, teaching patience, observation, and responsibility. He worked diligently on family chores, guided horses with subtle mastery, and helped his father, Jesse Grant, with tasks that required careful precision. At school, he remained reserved, absorbing knowledge thoughtfully rather than rushing through lessons. Even in these formative years, his calm demeanor and steady focus distinguished him from his peers. He began exploring beyond the familiar fields, learning to navigate streams and hills, observing patterns in nature and animals alike. These experiences fostered a growing sense of self-reliance, resilience, and quiet determination. In this unassuming period, the foundations of the young man who would one day lead armies and guide a nation were quietly, but firmly, taking root. By the age of 14, Ulysses S. Grant began preparing for a new chapter, a future at West Point Military Academy. The young teenager approached this transition with the same quiet determination that had shaped his early years. Days were filled with focused study, practice with horses, and careful observation of people and surroundings. He was no longer just a boy of Georgetown, he was a young man learning the importance of discipline, self-reliance, and resilience. Every task, whether drilling with a wooden staff, tending animals, or reading, honed his patience and judgment. The natural world around him, fields, streams, and forests, remained a classroom where he learned strategy, foresight, and calm thinking. In these formative teen years, the foundations of Ulysses S. Grant, the future general and president, were steadily solidifying, as he moved quietly yet purposefully toward a destiny that would shape a nation. At 16, Ulysses S. Grant stepped onto the grounds of the United States Military Academy at West Point, entering a world more disciplined and demanding than anything he had known. The Academy's stone buildings, strict schedules, and rigid expectations tested every young cadet. But Grant approached it with quiet focus, determined to adapt. He studied mathematics, engineering, and military tactics with steady effort, never seeking attention, yet always moving forward. His natural skill with horses earned respect, while his calm personality made him a steady presence among classmates. Marching drills, early morning inspections, and long nights of study shaped him into a disciplined young man. By the age of 19 and 20, the once reserved boy from Ohio had become a confident cadet, learning leadership not through noise or ambition, but through consistency, resilience, and quiet strength, traits that would define Ulysses S. Grant long before the nation knew his name. By the age of 20, Ulysses S. Grant stood near the top of his West Point class, quiet but respected. In 1843, he graduated and received his commission as a brevet second lieutenant, stepping into the United States Army with calm confidence. Assigned to the 4th U.S. Infantry, the young officer traveled far from home for the first time, riding through vast landscapes toward distant frontier posts. These early assignments tested his discipline and independence. Grant learned logistics, leadership, and the realities of military life through daily drills, supply duties, and managing soldiers older than himself. Yet amid the routine, he remained humble and observant, building a foundation of experience that would one day guide him through war and national leadership. At 22, Ulysses S. Grant was no longer the quiet boy from Ohio nor just a cadet, he was a young officer beginning the long march toward a destiny he could not yet imagine. At 22, Ulysses S. Grant entered the Mexican-American War, a conflict that would shape his understanding of leadership, courage, and the grim realities of battle. Serving as a young lieutenant, he rode through rugged terrain, marched long distances, and engaged in his first true combat. Grant observed strategy closely, learning from experienced commanders while forming his own opinions about warfare and responsibility. He distinguished himself not by loud bravery, but by calm action. Volunteering for dangerous missions, guiding troops under fire, and handling horses and supply lines with precision, the battles of Palo Alto, Resaca de la Palma, and Monterrey became early tests of his resolve. By the age of 25, Grant had earned a reputation for reliability and quiet fearlessness. These formative years prepared him not only for future command, but also for the heavy cost of war. An understanding that would guide him long before the Civil War placed him at the center of history. After the Mexican-American War, Ulysses S. Grant, now 25, returned to a quieter army life. The battles were over, but the challenges ahead were quieter, internal, and equally testing. Stationed at remote frontier posts, Grant faced isolation, long winters, and routines far removed from the intensity of war. He performed supply duties, managed small garrisons, and wrote frequent letters home, longing for purpose and family. The loneliness weighed heavily on him. Yet he remained disciplined, learning patience and responsibility in the stillness of military life. At 26, he married Julia Dent, the woman who became his emotional anchor. But frequent separations from her, along with harsh living conditions, chipped away at his spirit. By his late 20s, Grant began questioning whether the Army could ever offer the stability he wanted. At 30, standing on the edge of a changing life, Ulysses S. Grant faced a crossroads. One that would push him toward the struggles. In 1861, as the nation tears itself apart, Ulysses S. Grant, now 36, watches the Union he once served unravel into uncertainty. After years spent in quiet civilian life, he feels a familiar responsibility rising inside him, a sense that the country now needs every steady hand it can find. Grant leaves behind the small store he had struggled to keep afloat and returns to the uniform he once believed he would never wear again. In the crowded recruiting offices of Illinois, he brings order to confusion, guiding nervous volunteers with a calm voice and an unshakable presence. He offers no dramatic speeches, only discipline, precision, and a level head in a moment filled with fear. Though political officers doubt him, his men quickly recognize the strength behind his quiet manner. When he is appointed colonel of the 21st Illinois Infantry, Grant accepts without hesitation, prepared to lead with humility, resolve, and unwavering duty. In early 1862, Ulysses S. Grant, now 39, steps into the center of the Civil War with a determination few commanders can match. Leading Union forces toward Tennessee, he targets Fort Donelson, a Confederate stronghold whose capture could shift the momentum of the entire war. The winter air is harsh, the rivers swollen, and the ground frozen under the boots of his marching soldiers. Grant moves with quiet confidence, studying terrain, positioning artillery, and coordinating relentless assaults. When Confederate leaders attempt to negotiate, Grant refuses hesitation, delivering the words that will define his reputation: "No terms except unconditional surrender." The phrase spreads across newspapers nationwide, transforming this once overlooked officer into a rising Union hero. As the Confederate flag lowers and Union colors rise in its place, Grant remains calm, knowing this victory is only the beginning of a long and punishing struggle. By the spring of 1862, Ulysses S. Grant faces one of the most violent tests of his life at the Battle of Shiloh. As Confederate forces strike with brutal surprise, Grant remains unshaken, moving calmly through the chaos, rallying broken lines and giving orders with steady conviction. The battlefield is a nightmare of mud, smoke, and shattered trees. Yet Grant's refusal to retreat becomes the turning point of the fight. Though criticized for the heavy losses, he learns a lesson that shapes every decision ahead: victory demands relentless resolve. The following year, he turns toward Vicksburg, a fortress city guarding the Mississippi River. Grant maneuvers with precision, cutting supply lines, surrounding the city, and pressing the siege month after month. When Vicksburg finally falls on July 4, the Union celebrates a triumph that splits the Confederacy in two. Grant rises from obscurity to national prominence, recognized now as a commander whose calm determination can bend the entire war. By early 1864, Ulysses S. Grant, now 43, rises from the brutal battlefields of the West to become the Union's new general-in-chief. After years of unbroken victories, President Abraham Lincoln calls him to Washington, hoping Grant's steady resolve can finally bring the Civil War to an end. Grant arrives wearing a plain, mud-stained uniform, avoiding ceremony as he accepts the highest command in the Union Army. He studies grim reports, shattered supply lines, and exhausted regiments stretched across thousands of miles. But Grant does not hesitate. He crafts a bold strategy: strike the Confederacy on every front, at the same time, with relentless pressure. When spring arrives, he heads to the Eastern Theater to confront Robert E. Lee directly, knowing the campaign ahead will be long, bloody, and unforgiving. Yet Grant moves with quiet determination, convinced that constant pressure, discipline, and sacrifice can finally reunite the nation. By 1864, Ulysses S. Grant, now 45, takes command of all Union armies, determined to bring the Civil War to its final conclusion. He coordinates massive campaigns across multiple fronts, using strategy and relentless pressure to strain the Confederacy's resources. Grant moves boldly against Robert E. Lee, refusing to yield despite exhaustion, harsh terrain, and staggering casualties. Through the wilderness, Spotsylvania, Cold Harbor, and finally Petersburg, he maintains steady resolve, balancing discipline with daring maneuvers. Grant cuts off supply lines, presses sieges, and coordinates simultaneous assaults, understanding that constant pressure is the only path to victory. Critics question his methods, but he remains unwavering, aware that the Union's survival depends on every decision he makes. By April 1865, Lee surrenders at Appomattox Courthouse, and Ulysses S. Grant rides forward, calm, resolute, and victorious. In 1869, Ulysses S. Grant, now 46, ascends to the presidency of a nation still scarred by civil war. The country looks to him for guidance, reconciliation, and steadfast leadership. Grant brings the discipline and decisiveness that defined his military career to the White House, navigating complex politics, Reconstruction efforts, and the delicate task of reuniting former adversaries. He works tirelessly to protect the rights of freed African Americans, enforce civil law in resistant states, and stabilize a nation weary of violence and division. Foreign relations demand careful attention, and Grant's calm demeanor reassures allies and rivals alike. He travels between Washington's grand halls and the everyday struggles of citizens, always observing, listening, and acting with purpose. Though challenges arise, Grant's unwavering sense of duty shapes the presidency, establishing him not just as a war hero, but as a leader capable of guiding a fragile Union through uncertain times. As Ulysses S. Grant, now 48, leads the nation in his later presidential years, he faces political turmoil and challenges that test his resolve. Scandals among subordinates threaten to tarnish his administration, yet Grant remains steady, balancing loyalty with integrity. He enforces Reconstruction policies, using federal authority to protect freedmen and ensure fair elections in resistant southern states. Domestically, he guides economic recovery with careful decision-making, observing conditions firsthand and listening to citizens. Traveling extensively between the capital and troubled regions, Grant brings the discipline, patience, and decisiveness that defined his military career to every action. Despite criticism and political pressure, his calm demeanor and unwavering sense of duty guide the nation. Through turbulence, he demonstrates that strength, fairness, and commitment to justice can steer a recovering country, leaving a legacy of principled leadership. After leaving the presidency, Ulysses S. Grant, now 51, embarks on a quieter life marked by reflection, travel, and literary endeavor. He faces financial difficulties but meets them with determination and resilience, demonstrating the same discipline that defined his military and political careers. Grant travels extensively, visiting friends, family, and former battlefields, observing a nation transformed by his leadership. Settling in New York, he begins writing his memoirs, meticulously recounting his military campaigns and personal experiences, determined to leave an honest record for history. Though his health declines, his mind remains sharp, and he focuses on legacy beyond politics or fame. By the time of his passing at 63, Ulysses S. Grant has secured his place in history as a military strategist, a president dedicated to justice, and a man of unwavering principle. His memoirs stand as a testament to courage, perseverance, and the power of disciplined leadership. As Ulysses S. Grant, now 63, nears the end of his life, he completes his memoirs with unwavering focus, leaving a testament to courage, strategy, and integrity. His health declines, yet his mind remains sharp, reviewing battles, decisions, and personal experiences with meticulous care. Grant reflects on a life shaped by military discipline, political service, and dedication to justice. Family and friends surround him, offering comfort, while he writes each page with precision, determined to preserve an honest record for future generations. Though aware of mortality, Grant's spirit remains resolute, embodying calm strength and unwavering principle. When he passes, the nation mourns a man who shaped its destiny through leadership, perseverance, and vision. His memoirs endure as a lasting legacy, inspiring all who study courage, discipline, and the pursuit of a unified, just nation. The life of Ulysses S. Grant, who passed at 63, leaves an enduring mark on the United States. His military brilliance reshaped warfare, demonstrating strategy, discipline, and unwavering courage that preserved the Union.
As president, he championed civil rights, Reconstruction, and national reconciliation, guiding a fractured nation toward stability.
Beyond battles and politics, Grant's memoirs offer a timeless record of leadership, perseverance, and principle, influencing generations of historians, soldiers, and citizens. Monuments, schools, and public memory honor his contributions, reminding the world of a man who navigated immense challenges with calm resolve. Grant's legacy endures as a testament to integrity, determination, and the pursuit of a just nation, inspiring those who follow to lead with courage, fairness, and vision. His name, Ulysses S. Grant, resonates as a symbol of unity, strength, and the enduring ideals of a nation he served so faithfully.